On another occasion, as we sat on a cold winter's night over glasses of hot tea and some Jewish white bread which I had brought with me, he asked me suddenly if there existed anywhere in the Jewish sources a list of the Siliarchs or governors who ruled Jerusalem from the Antonia fortress. Siliarchs? I asked. Yes, he repeated, the officers in charge of the temple. I have never heard of such a list, I replied. We have the names of the high priests, transmitted by Josephus. We also have those of the procurators, but the Siliarchs— Is there no mention anywhere in your sources, he asked again, of the Siliarch Cornelius? No, I answered. That name occurs, as far as I know, only in the New Testament, as being that of the centurion in Caesarea. I have the impression that Cornelius was also the name of the centurion of Capharnaum. No, not the centurion of Capharnaum. Him I knew well, personally. We met often. I am speaking of the Siliarch Cornelius who commanded the Antonia fortress and was charged with the supervision of the temple in the time of Pontius Pilate. I looked closely at Pan Viedomsky, and I was aware of a queer change in his appearance. The few hairs on his head were in wild disarray. His eyes glittered strangely, sending out rays of feverish light from their deep sockets. It occurred to me that the man was ill. I wanted to soothe him, to make him stop running fiercely back and forth. I suggested that perhaps it would be better for us not to pursue this topic. He ought to lie down and try to sleep. In fact, I rose as if to go. Then, to my utter amazement, he grabbed me suddenly with his bony fingers, making me feel that a corpse had laid hands on me, and in a tone of stern command cried, "Stop!" He forced me to return to my chair while he himself sat down again in his accustomed place at the table opposite me, and fixed an eager, penetrating glance on me. His face had taken on what was an extraordinary pallor even for him. The cheekbones stood out with the sharpness of a skeleton through the thin, withered skin. The eyes, blazing in their sockets, dominated the dead face. A long time that piercing stare was fixed on me. Then finally he addressed me again, calmly, but with another voice, a voice which I did not know, but a voice which I recognized as one accustomed to the issuing of commands and the utterance of sentence. "Jew, do you not know me?" he asked. "Look well at me. Have you never seen me leading my cohort into the inner court of the temple to restore order among you Jews?" I was silent. "I am Cornelius, the Siliarch of the cohort stationed in the Antonia. Cornelius, the lieutenant and representative of Pontius Pilate in Jerusalem. Answer, Jew! Do you not know me? Have you not seen me in the court of the Gentiles, in the temple, when all of you fled from my path?" An eerie sensation filled me. I was not afraid of him, of course. There was only a feeling of pity and discomfort at this unveiling of his secret, and yet a profound curiosity as to the identity of this man held me fastened to my place, and, deliberately ignoring the possibility of fantastic consequences, I went along with him, as it were, encouraging him to sink deeper into the incomprehensible role born of his sick imagination. "Why, yes," I mumbled, "I recognize you, Cornelius of the Antonia fortress. Is that the way to address me, Jew? The Jews of Jerusalem called me only by my title, Hegemon Cornelius. Yes, Hegemon Cornelius." He looked again into my face. "And have I not seen you? The curly black hair, the young sprouting beard, and the pale face, they are not unfamiliar to me. Were you not among the ringleaders of those who dared to lift their voices against the high priest, against Pilate, and even against Rome, when we were dragging Yeshua of Nazareth with his crown of thorns to the cross at Golgotha? Were you not among those who tried to break through our ranks in order to liberate that rebel of yours? Did not our gallant legionaries have to draw their broadswords in order to hold you back? Yes, I recognize you, for I remember that later on you were brought before me. What was your name then? Jochanan. Yes, Jochanan. The same face. I remember it till this day." The game had gone a little too far, and consumed though I was with eagerness to hear what he still had to say, I repressed the impulse to exploit his sickness in order to uncover his secret. I tried to awaken him. "Pan Viedomsky! Pan Viedomsky! What are you talking about? Wake up! You are dreaming." There were suspended before me two wide-open, wakeful and terrified eyes. The wakefulness did not come into the eyes all at once, but gradually, as if a mist were dispersing from before them, and the pupils, motionless of themselves, broke through, emerging from the unknown realms of night to surrounding reality, and shining more and more clearly. The more life they took on, the larger and more terrified and damper they became. It was as though Pan Viedomsky was weeping, but that the tears were falling within him. His face seemed to grow longer, and an unfathomable sorrow lay in the deep folds of his forehead, and still more in the tear sacks and in the countless wrinkles about his eyes. The withered cheeks sank deeper, the jaws stuck out further, the moustaches lay like shorn wings over his drooping lips. The eyes were turned toward me, but it was only when they were cleared that he saw me. He opened his mouth to say something. The jaws remained apart, but no sound issued. The upper half of his set of false teeth, in which there were several gaps, fell on his lower gums. He lacked not only words, but breath. I could see how he was trying to draw in air through his big, distended nostrils. I could mark the passage of air into his lungs by the quiver of the Adam's apple behind the hanging skin folds of his throat. He stretched out his convulsive fingers toward me and drew them back. At last he found his breath, and stammering with excitement and fury, he babbled, "Are you here?" "Yes." "And you heard what I said?" "Certainly." He was silent for a moment while he pierced me through with his glance, which grew sharper and sharper. "You can't leave this place any more." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You have heard my secret. You cannot go from this room." "What secret?" "You revealed nothing to me." He found strength enough at last to seize the arms of his chair and to lift himself erect. "I assure you," I said, "that your secret will be sealed within me as within a tomb, and that no one will ever hear a word of it." "That secret can be sealed only with your death," he said dramatically, and, as it seemed to me, in a false, assumed tone which broke in with devastating effect on the comedy he had been playing. But what was more serious was the fact that he was moving toward the door. "What are you doing?" "You are remaining here with me." "What are you talking about?" I cried, and hastened to intercept him before he could reach the door. Nervous, convulsive fingers and nails fastened on my flesh. "I have said that you are remaining here with me." "But what are you talking about?" I repeated, and freed myself with an energetic gesture, thrusting him from me in a sudden burst of anger. He tottered drunkenly on his feet, and would have fallen if I had not rushed to support him. "I did not ask you to unfold your secret to me. You did it of your own accord. Go to sleep. That will calm you." "Stop! Stop! Where are you going?" "I don't want to remain with you," I said, standing at the door. "You are not well." "The Jew has robbed me! The Jew has robbed me!" Pan Viedomsky began to scream. I closed the door again, lest the sound of his voice reach the neighbors. I took him by the hand, led him to his chair, and made him sit down. He was as weak as a child, and offered no resistance. "Pan Viedomsky, you are ill. You must calm yourself. I assure you by everything that I hold sacred that I will not reveal your secret to anyone. Calm yourself." He remained seated and buried his face in his hands. I waited 2 or 3 minutes before I left the room. Once, outside, I paused at the door and listened. I heard a low weeping. I returned, went over to him, lifted him up, placed him on his bed and covered him. He suffered me to treat him like a child. At last I was out of the house and in the open air. I hurried homeward, my mind made up that our relationship was definitely ended. I would not see him again.